I'm in the friendly city of Port Elizabeth and flew out all this way to meet one of South Africa's legends in motorsport, Tschops Sipuka. With a number of successful achievements in the local and international arena, Tschops competed in a diverse range of races, and I'm here today to find out how he got to where he is now. Let's check him out. Now, Tschops, can you tell me a bit about your background, where you're from, and how it was growing up for you?
Well, a bit of background on myself. I was born and bred in the Eastern Cape. I grew up in an area back then called the Transkei, in a small village situated on the N2 on the other side of Mthatha, called Gumbu. I went through my junior years of schooling there, preschool, and mid-high school I went across to Mthatha Vela Private School, and from there I went to Khutso College. And I always had the passion for cars.
Now that you've mentioned that, how did you get into motorsport?
Well, you know, because I had the passion for cars, and then I did mechanical engineering, it sort of led my path to doing motorsport, in the sense that when you're growing up as a young man in rural areas, you never get to see the real world. You always think it's far than what meets the eye. So an uncle of mine used to work for British Petroleum at the time, and he knew friends. His friends were friends with Terry Moss, who was my role model in motorsport. They then started a conversation about transformation in motorsport and this. And then Terry said, look, we don't find many of people of color who are quite competent enough in terms of driving, and someone you could see you could nurture the talent and develop it to the next level. So the conversation started like that, and then I started calling Terry non-stop, looking for an opportunity just to test a racing car. And it was at this track, Aldo Scubanti, where everything started. And on my first day of testing, I didn't disappoint, and then from there it just grew from strength to strength.
So you are the first black motorsport champion in South Africa.
Correct.
And I just want to understand from that point of view, how do you feel about that, and what are also the challenges you faced during that journey?
They were immense, because remember, you were coming into a field that was predominantly white. The color didn't make a difference in my life, and maybe did make a difference in other circles within motorsport. I was at my best behavior. I was just driving to the best I could. We were winning races, we won championships, and it was quite tough. You know, you always had to sit in your corner and just mind what you did. You know, you didn't want to step on anybody's toes. But mainly for me, it was always about doing the best I could on the track, and if it meant winning, that's what it was going to be. I'd be silly not to say there were racial tensions. Sure. There were racial tensions. I think it's the way I managed them. They never really affected me. You know, if someone called me, okay, well, it really didn't matter. It did happen. I mean, there was no skin off my back. I just managed it to the best of my ability.
I love that. In terms of transformation today, do you believe transformation in motorsports has is better than before?
Well, I've been out of the game now since 2013. I serve in the board. There isn't much transformation in motorsport. And I think it's because of the nature of the sport. You know, it requires sponsorship. I'm not going to say government must be involved. I mean, it would be on their own prerogative, in their own terms, if they want to be involved. And I wouldn't go as far as saying this is how they could be involved. I think it's something that they need to research if they're talking about transformation that must take place in the sports and in other sports in general.
Now, someone, Ekasi, young, ambitious, and really wants to get into motorsports today, right now, and has been struggling so much to find, support and that push to actually get into it. What advice would you give that young adult that is watching the show right now?
Look, it's going to be different for everybody. I just came to an era where I really was in the right place and time. And I could have been not there, but I think it's because it was the willpower to try and persevere. So a young kid who wants to live the dream, I think the first point of call is education behind it, because you can jump into a car and be able to drive the car, but you don't have the ability to interpret what the car is doing. So that really requires a bit of engineering background to understand why it's not turning, why its weight is moving forward, what it does under acceleration. So all those things come when you understand a bit of engineering. So that youngster needs to concentrate on understanding our car behavior and entrench himself in reading books that have got to do with engineering, because that will give him a step in the right direction. It will put his foot forward against somebody who doesn't even understand what happens around cars.
From the streets of Transkei to the racetracks of the world, Tschops Sipuka exemplifies what can happen when passion meets opportunity. Being the very first black motorsport champion in South Africa, the very first Volkswagen Polo Cup competitor to win 2 consecutive titles back to back. Now he gives a new definition to chop chop.